DayStar Television Network's flagship program was hosted by Rachel Lamb Brown and Rebecca Lamb Weiss on the morning of May 7, 2026, just as they had done dozens of times before. The cameras were turned on. Over 64 million American homes received the program. Additionally, they were unaware that their mother was dying at a cancer treatment facility in Mexico, someplace south of the U.S. border. That Thursday, DayStar Television Network co-founder Joanie Lamb passed away at the age of 65. Her husband, Dr. Doug Weiss, had taken her to the Oasis of Hope Clinic in Tijuana, Mexico, the Monday before she passed away, where she spent the last 4 days of her life. Audio released by the Roy's Report and independently verified by Jonathan and Susie Lamb claims that Joanie's daughters were happy and chatting on the air the morning she passed away, totally oblivious to her illness. About 10 minutes before the network made the public announcement on social media, her son Jonathan, who had been cut off from the family since DayStar sacked him in November 2024, found out about his mother's passing. Neither Doug Weiss nor his sisters made the call. It came from Tom Callander, DayStar's board lawyer. Within hours following the announcement, Jonathan's wife Susie Lamb commented on X, which was once Twitter. They knew she was dying on Wednesday night, but they didn't call Jonathan to come say goodbye, she wrote. We weren't informed of anything. We were down the road but weren't given a call to say goodbye. We forgive them. That was the end of Joanie Lamb's last chapter. And you have to go back to the beginning of Doug Weiss's involvement in this story to comprehend why it ended that way and what it has to do with the man who has since completely vanished from DayStar's airwaves. Doug Weiss had established a 3-decade career as a licensed psychologist in Colorado Springs, Colorado, before he ever made an appearance on a Christian television show. At 720 Elkton Drive, his business, Heart to Heart Counseling Center, focuses on treating betrayal trauma, sexual addiction recovery, and what Weiss refers to as intimacy anorexia, a word he created to characterize emotional disengagement in marriage. According to his Psychology Today page, he is accessible for both online and in-person therapy sessions. He wrote almost 40 books over the years and made appearances on popular shows including Fox News, Oprah, Dr. Phil, and Good Morning America. He wasn't an exposure-seeking religious broadcaster. He was a licensed clinician who came to DayStar via one means, being close to Joanie Lamb during her loss. Marcus Lamb, a co-founder of DayStar and Joanie's husband for over 30 years, passed away from COVID-19 on November 30th, 2021. After his passing, Joanie was left to oversee the network by herself during what was undoubtedly one of the most challenging times in its history. The institutional pressure was tremendous, the pain was deep, and the already developing examination of DayStar's internal culture was about to becoming much more intense. Joanie and Weiss became close in that setting, and their working connection developed into something more intimate. They were married on June 10, 2023. The union sparked uproar right away. Many evangelical watchers found it concerning that Weiss had divorced his former wife, Lisa, after about 30 years of marriage. Weiss did not seem to have a good scriptural reason to dissolve his first marriage, according to Jonathan Lamb and his wife Susie, who opposed the union on biblical grounds. The DayStar board, including board ally Jimmy Evans, reportedly disregarded Jonathan's position as personal opinion when he voiced this worry. Evans described Weiss's claimed reason of emotional abandonment as adequate grounds. That argument marked a significant turning point in the alienation that ultimately resulted in Jonathan's dismissal from the network in November 2024. On camera, however, the changeover was comparatively smooth for the audience. In addition to hosting his own recurrent program, Healing Time with Dr. Doug Weiss, which airs Monday through Friday at 11:30 a.m., Weiss joined Joanie as a co-host on Ministry Now, DayStar's live daily flagship program, Eastern. He was the network's second most visible non-family face for almost 2 years. Then, in April 2026, a change occurred. Weiss revealed to the audience during a live appearance on Ministry Now on April 6, 2026, that Joanie had been off the air because of two little fractures in her spine. He requested prayer from the audience. Many viewers pushed back right away on the internet. Joanie's obvious physical changes over the past few months, such as noticeable weight fluctuations, apparent edema, and changes in her speech, were recognized by comment sections and watchdog communities as being consistent with something considerably more serious than a spinal injury alone. Weiss did not provide any further information. In a taped interview with Julie Roys of the Roys Report, which was done after Joanie's passing and independently confirmed with Jonathan and Susie Lamb, an unnamed source stated what DayStar never officially acknowledged and what he failed to reveal. That source said that Joanie Lamb had been diagnosed with breast cancer that had spread to her bones. Weiss's April on-air description of hairline spinal fractures was not a primary injury. They resulted from the disease spreading to her skeletal system. The term cancer was never utilized in DayStar's official communications. The sickness was never given a name. What transpired during Joanie's last week was described by the anonymous source, whose identity Julie Roys verified but whose voice was muffled. Doug Weiss accompanied Joanie to the Oasis of Hope Clinic in Mexico, a hospital renowned for providing integrative and alternative cancer therapies, on the Monday before she passed away. On Thursday, May 7th, Joanie passed away there. She passed away far from her kids in a faraway nation. The same source informed the Roys Report that when she tried to text Joanie in the last days, she got a response that seemed chilly and unlike Joanie. "I've tried everything," which made her think Weiss had taken over Joanie's phone and was handling her interactions. In her written research, Julie Roys conceded that Joanie might have been too sick to answer directly. However, the source depicted a dying lady alone, with a man whose presence in her life had shattered her family, and whose entire institutional status at DayStar depended only on his personal bond with her, distant from home and her children. The institutional foundation for his presence disappeared when she passed away, ending that relationship. However, Mexico was not the location of the story's most significant incident. It took place in a private meeting between Joanie Lamb and Tom Callander, the lawyer who chairs DayStar's board, around 3 weeks prior to Joanie's passing. The unnamed source's statement, which was published in the Roys Report and directly verified by Jonathan and Susie Lamb, states that Callander paid Joanie a visit at her house approximately 3 weeks before to her passing. Joanie sat up in her makeup chair for the meeting, even though she was really sick. She had dressed and readied herself for the discussion. She informed Callander straight out during the discussion, "If Jonathan tries to reach out, give him back DayStar." In an attempt to set up a pre-funeral reconciliation meeting between Jonathan and his sisters, this same source called Callander in the days between Joanie's passing and her memorial. Callander sobbed over the phone. He shed tears. According to the source, he verified Joanie's assertion by saying, "I have been waiting for this phone call. I have been waiting for this phone call." Reconciliation was necessary, he said. He pledged to contact the sisters and return the call. Susie claims that when Callander called Jonathan and Susie directly later, he was tearful and said that bearing the burden of this family split had been one of the most trying experiences of his life. He also expressed a desire to embrace them. He returned the call 2 hours later. He claimed that Rachel and Rebecca were not prepared to meet prior to the burial. They would get back to it later, he said. That meeting after the burial never took place. Callander texted the source on May 20th, 2 days after the memorial service on May 18th. It said, "Please correct your statement immediately that you spoke to the head of the board, and that I said anything to you about what Joanie's last wishes were. I did not share any such statement with you." The reversal was total. In writing, the man who had sobbed with relief at the possibility of reconciliation was now claiming that the entire conversation had never happened. The memorial itself was a study in institutional control and took place on May 18th at Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas. Susie Lamb and Jonathan were present. They were sat far away from the family area. There was no speaking part for Jonathan. Rebecca and Rachel both spoke from the platform. The anonymous source and several observers characterized Pastor Jimmy Evans's sermon as an indirect public humiliation of individuals who had questioned Joni's leadership in the years preceding her demise. Doug Weiss did not make a live appearance. He sent in a pre-recorded video message reflecting on his relationship with Joanie and stating that if he tried to talk to her face-to-face, his sadness would overpower him. His final public appearance related to DayStar was in that video. Since the Ministry Now program on April 6th, he has not made a live appearance on the network. Jonathan Lamb made a formal public statement via the Roy's Report and on his own Instagram account after the anonymous source's account was published. The statement read in part, "Learning that my mother's dying wish was for me to return to leadership at DayStar is both healing and deeply confirming. The estrangement between us was one of the most painful seasons of my life, and knowing that her heart moved toward restoration in her final days brings me a peace I didn't expect to feel so soon. Her wish aligns with what my father communicated to our family and the board in his succession plan. Both of my parents, in their final days, pointed in the same direction." He continued, "This was never about ambition or title. It's about faithfulness to a calling my parents recognized, and that I have never walked away from, even in the hardest moments. My desire is to honor my parents, to seek peace where peace is possible, and to see DayStar flourish for generations to come. I am hopeful that the board will honor what my mother asked for and what my father asked for before her. DayStar has never belonged to any one person. It belongs to God. I remain ready to serve." In a separate Instagram post, Jonathan added, "In recent conversations regarding reconciliation, we expressed a willingness to pursue peace, forgiveness, and healing within the family. We remain willing to." The posture of those words matters as much as their content. They are not hostile. An ultimatum does not exist. Neither the board nor his sisters are the target of any public demands. It is a declaration made by a man who has been informed that his mother wants him to return home, and who is opting to react in public with preparedness rather than resentment. As of July 2026, no public DayStar announcement had verified a board decision, a formal reconciliation, or a shift in Jonathan's position within the network. A press statement or a board announcement did not provide the clearest official indication of who is currently in charge of DayStar. It was taken from the network's July 2026 newsletter. For the first time in the newsletter's history, Joanie Lamb's daughters wrote the personal note part, which had previously been written by her every month. In the coming months, this special place in the newsletter will feature messages from different members of our DayStar leadership team. We'll use it to share important ministry updates, exciting network news, and stories of what God is doing around the world as DayStar continues to grow and reach more people with the gospel. They also wrote, "One of the greatest gifts our parents gave us was the example of a life surrendered to God's calling. They taught us to trust the Lord through every season, and as we look to the future, we do so with confidence, knowing that God is faithful. It is based on faith." Furthermore, it says nothing at all about three of the biggest unanswered issues pertaining to the network: the estranged brother, the inheritance, and the governance structure. Jonathan Lamb is not mentioned at all in that letter. Doug Weiss is not mentioned at all in that letter. The eldest son and the widowed stepfather are subtly left out of the official narrative, and the generational shift being conveyed to the donor base is from mother to daughters. This leads us back to the initial query posed by this video. Where has Doug Weiss disappeared to? His career outside of DayStar has continued uninterrupted. Through July 2026, Heart to Heart Counseling Center in Colorado Springs is confirmed to be an active business. He is still listed as available for online and in-person therapy in his Psychology Today page. According to his official website, dougweiss.com, He is a nationally renowned expert in his area and the founder and executive director of Heart to Heart. Without mentioning DayStar, his television position, or his loss, his social media activity in the weeks after Joni's passing has concentrated on therapeutic and wellness content, EMDR treatment, cognitive health, men's mental health, and fasting. Professionally, he is back in the same lane that he was in before Joanie Lamb came into his life. Healing time with Dr. Doug Weiss is still listed as running Monday through Friday at 11:30 a.m. in DayStar's official program directory as of this recording. Eastern. The program is listed similarly on the Canadian DayStar website. It's unclear if these sites represent current programming or are just outdated listings that haven't been changed during the shift. There has been no formal statement from DayStar on his future job or confirmation that he is no longer employed. There has been complete quiet. Strategically speaking, it is easy to see why the new DayStar leadership chooses to keep quiet instead of making a formal announcement. The compressed timeline between his divorce from his first wife, Lisa, and his marriage to Joni, the approximately $100,000 in DayStar card charges recorded by the Roy's report as related to their 2023 Mexico honeymoon, which Joni publicly denied but expense reports confirmed, the $769,220 in ministry jet costs identified by the Trinity Foundation as personal travel during that same period, and the concerns raised by Joanie's March 2026 decision to execute a quitclaim deed on her $2.9 million condominium in Miramar Beach, Florida, without Weiss's signature. Just a few weeks before she passed away, Joanie made that property shift, which was a sign of his final thoughts regarding his place in her inheritance. Conversely, publicly denouncing him would encourage legal action and prolong the media cycle far beyond the present. The institutional goal of going forward covertly is served by the existing course, which neither restores him nor addresses him. Since Marcus Lamb's passing, DayStar has handled the majority of institutional controversy using the same logic: say as little as possible, let time do the work, and rely on the partner base's commitment to fill the void with confidence. All of this is more difficult to analyze from the outside than it would be for almost any similar organization of equal size due to a larger structural reality. Word of God Fellowship Incorporated, DayStar's parent company, is exempt from completing the IRS Form 990 that the majority of NGOs must file publicly since it is a church. Because of this exemption, donors to this network have no official way to confirm the makeup of the board, the salaries of the officers, or the manner in which the new leadership structure is making important financial choices. That degree of secrecy is a legal decision, as the Roy's report has shown, and in contrast, Trinity Broadcasting Network's publicly accessible 990 filings show. However, it's a decision. The lack of financial transparency is a significant issue for a network that, according to its own accounting, reaches over 64 million American households. Everything else in this story has functioned inside this architecture. Long-tenured DayStar executives, such as CFO Arnold Torres, Senior VP Steve Wilhite, and Board Counsel Tom Callander, are thought to have been part of the leadership group Joni put together prior to her passing. They worked alongside Rachel and Rebecca, who were visible to the public. The key unsolved question in this entire scenario is whether the board will eventually grant Joni's purported deathbed request and provide Jonathan with a real route. As of July 2026, the board is in charge of the organization, the daughters are writing the public relations, and the man who was DayStar's most well-known non-family figure for almost 2 years is back in Colorado Springs, discreetly seeing therapy clients and writing about the value of emotional well-being. In the end, Doug Weiss's absence from DayStar is a tale of what occurs when institutional access is solely based on personal relationships. Weiss did not serve as a DayStar officer. He never served on the board. There was no succession plan that mentioned him. Joni wanted him to be on the network, so he did. Additionally, the institutional foundation for his presence vanished along with Joni. That is not a difficult conclusion. However, the path to that conclusion includes a dying woman who was transported to Mexico without her children's knowledge, a bored lawyer who sobbed before recanting, a son who was kept away from his mother's deathbed, a funeral where he sat in the wrong section, and two daughters who now write the network's monthly newsletter in place of their mother's voice. In her taped interview, the anonymous source for the Roy's report made a statement that sticks with you long after the facts have been resolved. Whether you agree with her assessment or not, Joni was a godly, truly godly, God-fearing woman. She was all about the Lord until Doug came in the picture. They have records. Additionally, DayStar has made it official policy to keep quiet about their resolution. DayStar is still there. The network that Marcus and Joanie Lamb transformed from a little UHF station in Montgomery, Alabama, into the biggest Christian television network in the United States, is about to embark on its next phase without a named public leader, a board that is answerable to the public financial disclosure, or its founders. It has a July newsletter that two sisters have signed. In light of everything this series has examined, one specific statement in that letter carries a lot of weight. In their letter to their donor base, Rachel and Rebecca state, "We are deeply honored to carry the vision forward alongside each of you." They do not specify who else might join them. The brother who claims he is still prepared to serve is not mentioned. Furthermore, the individual who was present in Mexico at the very end is not mentioned.